This is the comparative analysis for Ross Gerber, Yanjun Fan, and Shannon McEvoy, and we'll be covering the analysis between the two African companies based primarily out of Ghana, Sproxil and Afrostream. And this is Shannon McEvoy. I'll be covering the first three sections of the paper, which are the challenge or functional area, the approaches, and the ICT comparison. You see the challenge here. The industry that we're looking at is the technology industry. These two companies, both African-based, are both in the technology field, but somewhat different. The first company, Sproxil, the successful company in our research, created a program for phones and other portable devices that can verify the authenticity and effectiveness of prescription drugs to make sure that they aren't counterfeit. The other, Afrostream, provides a Netflix type service to African-speaking and African-based mediums for TV and movies. And you see some of the challenges that they face producing innovative technology, identifying a gap and exploiting the opportunity, finding that thing that isn't currently being satisfied in the market and producing a product to do so. And also changing lives and meeting those unmet desires and changing the lives of the people that use those products. Reach is another big challenge that these companies face, developing easy to use, accessible technology that can be used in that part of the world and getting a definite target market to utilize those systems. And then also a big one, as we'll see in the next few slides here, is funding. Finding that funding to get your company off the ground and moving forward in the right direction. Approaches that both companies used, the need, identifying that product or service that will meet a currently unfulfilled need in that target audience, or taking a current or existing product or service and making it better. Then funding, that big one, securing the startup funding to initiate the project and allowing you to focus on that mission that the founder or the founding team in that organization originally started out with. And being adaptable is always important, innovating and being flexible if you see that what you're doing right now isn't working. As well as awareness, quickly developing a customer base to further support investment and growth as a big part and plays right into funding. Step one of the comparison, finding what your ideal self is. Sproxil had a really well-defined mission, as you can see here, building trust across supply chains with mobile technology solutions that emphasize direct engagement from the factory through to the consumer, and also a solid vision as well that goes with their founder, Ashifi Gogo's original mission for starting that company. Then Afrostream, founded by Tanji Bakang, that's the streaming media service. He had a mission to bring Afro-Caribbean, and African American films and series to a greater audience so they can be distributed. And it seems like he had a good idea for what he wanted to emulate or what he wanted to be, something like Netflix, some sort of streaming service, but not a solid vision on how to get there. Step two, comparing your real self on your ideal self, identifying strengths and gaps. Here you see some of Sproxil's strengths. Ashifi Gogo, the founder, really influenced a lot of change around him and wanted to see that change happen during his lifetime. He had a really, socially motivated mission of what he wanted to do. And then they also were willing to adapt and pivot their product, which was huge, when they started out identifying organic products in grocery stores, but then moving on to the need to identify counterfeit drugs and make sure you're getting good drugs. Sproxil had some weaknesses, of course, lack of funding, which they were able to overcome, as we'll see, and then lack of regulation by African governments that led to a lot of problems within what they were doing. Afrostream, strengths, lack of service delivering that type of content, and they had a large market, across the African community and African-speaking people across the world. Weaknesses, funding, they had a small team, and they needed an extremely high amount of startup money. Step three, Sproxil was able to develop and close those gaps by increasing awareness, getting cooperation between African governments, and expanding into other products. And Afrostream really had problems doing that because it just cost so much money to buy more rights to more streaming services. And then finally, steps 4 and 5 of the ICT comparison, the practice/experimentation and support. Sproxil, was able to implement its strategy by, practicing their altruistic mission, and that paid off through the leadership of Dr. Gogo and building that relationships and those trusts between its investors and its consumers. Then Afrostream was ultimately simply held up by funding issues, it seems. And the only way to increase its use was to buy more content, which was prohibitively expensive, and their small team was unable to secure the trust of investors to fulfill Bakang's vision.
So next we'll talk about the positive emotional attractors and the negative emotional attractors. First, we'll just summarize what those mean, and these are things that are taken directly from Dr. Richard Boydis' studies. So first, basically, positive emotional attractors are all the good things that inspire you and make you happy inside to inspire you to act, whereas negative emotional attractors are the things that might stress you out and encourage you to act to get rid of that stress. Positive emotional attractors encourage you to act based on a positive stimulus, whereas negative emotional attractors encourage you to act based on a negative stimulus. Positive emotional attractors inspire your coworkers or your colleagues or peers around you to thrive. They don't just inspire them to just try to survive and get by. They encourage you to reach higher. Individuals using positive emotional attractors are usually resonant with those around them. They're on the same wavelength. They're relationship focused, and they're in touch with their real self and their ideal self. They focus on building dreams. They focus on all the possibilities that are available to you at the time, and they build hope in those around them and in themselves because of the positive emotional attractor use. People also must use positive emotional attractors, according to Dr. Richard Boydis, 3 times as much as they use negative emotional attractors. This is what yields the best results. So we'll talk about now negative emotional attractors. Again, they force you to act based on a negative stimulus. They push the individual interacting with them to act because of the stress that they feel, and this really inspires the human's natural survival instinct, which is not always the best approach. Individuals using negative emotional attractors are usually dissonant. They're not in line with those around them. They might act a bit more selfishly, and they're driven by expectations, not necessarily positive things. Negative emotional attractors are focused on the reality of today, on the problems that we face today, and they inspire fear in those around them. Again, this is a stressor that you encounter, so that's what inspires you to act. Dr. Richard Boydis also said that NEA inspires stronger memories, and that's why he encourages the 3-to-1 ratio. So he says that negative emotional attractors should only make up about 25% of the attractors that you use, because again, they provide stronger memories that last longer. So you need to cancel that out with more positive emotional attractors. So to sum it up, change begins with positive emotional attractors because you have more of them, and you move back and forth between positive emotional attractors and negative emotional attractors. You need both for true progress. You just need more positive than negative to be a healthy company and person in the end. Next, we'll talk about the positive emotional attractors as they relate specifically to Sproxil, and there are many of them. All internal messages are positive emotional attractors at Sproxil, and that starts really from the top with Ashifi Gogo, the CEO. Everyone really who works at Sproxil, who engages with Sproxil, is positively communicating with each other, but again, that starts at the top with the CEO, and he began that when Sproxil was founded, that they built a culture of motivation and encouragement throughout the company, and that really shows with their rapid growth that they've enjoyed since founding. They've also won awards all over the world, mostly for their progress financially and their progress socially, but it's also a result of their positive emotional attractor use within their company. They have a positive image of social change around the world, and that inspires action from their employees and from their consumers. They were able to build rapport with governments around Africa and around other parts of the world, all because of their positive emotional attractor use. So they are also in line with Dr. Richard Boydis' guideline of 3 emotional or positive emotional attractors to 1 negative emotional attractor, and so that really helps their growth as well. However, again, Sproxil does make use of negative emotional attractors, and this is still okay that they do, because it's in line with Dr. Richard Boydis' teachings that a company or an individual needs 3 positive emotional attractors to 1 negative emotional attractor, but they still need negative emotional attractors, and Sproxil does do that. It's primarily found in their advertisements. The advertisements really, when I was looking at them, they really actually strike stress in me when I read them, and it really capitalizes on the alternative to using their technology. Again, their technology is built around stopping counterfeit drug use, so their advertisements show you the risks, and the alternatives to using Sproxil is being sick with counterfeit drugs or possibly even dying. So those messages really strike stress in people who see them, and that is the negative emotional attractor that inspires them to act and to use Sproxil technology. Next, we'll move on to the positive emotional attractors and negative emotional attractors for Afrostream. And what we'll find is that Afrostream employed many more negative emotional attractors than they did positive, and this was out of whack with Dr. Boydis' teaching and probably led to their demise. All throughout the company, they had negative rhetoric, especially at the top, where the founder called the company a small miracle, and he wasn't speaking positively. He was speaking about how they were lucky to be alive when they were competing with Netflix and Amazon and things like that. So that negative and speak at the top that didn't really talk about any future hope, it didn't lead to good things for Afrostream. They were also short on cash and repeatedly asked investors for money, which I'm sure didn't really positively affect the investors. And they also had dark and non-inspiring advertisements that they put out publicly. You can see them on the right there. They're dark colors. They don't have a lot of words or really inspire any positivity on those who see them. So I saw those as negative emotional attractors as well. So again, that we've seen most of their things are negative emotional attractors, which doesn't meet the 3-to-1 requirement. And finally, when Afrostream closed, the founder came out and said that the size of his team, specifically what he was most ashamed of, which I thought was a great example of the negative rhetoric that was going around about Afrostream, that the company's CEO would come out and say that his team was what he was ashamed of. So all in all, I think there were many, many more negative emotional attractors than positive emotional attractors at Afrostream. Next, we'll move on to the shared vision portion of this presentation, and first we'll talk about the positive shared vision for Sproxil, and then we'll move on to the one that didn't work with Afrostream. So you can see here that I have a flowchart set up that really talks about the steps to building a shared vision, and we'll see how all these fit together for Sproxil and how they did not for Afrostream. So first, starting on the left, Sproxil displayed the appropriate level of self-efficacy. They employed passion and aspiration, and their career stage or their life cycle in their company also matched these passions and aspirations. They had a high self-belief in themselves that stemmed from past successes, but they also didn't take those successes for granted. So that was the right level of self-efficacy. They had a passion for creating new ideas and working with the public and with governments, and aspirations to enable customers in populous emerging markets to make the best decisions for them. They were also in a life cycle of creating jobs and developing themselves with society. So all of their focus was around building a social positive for the world, which really led to good things for them down the road. Feasibility was important for them, and that really matched with their self-efficacy. They also had a purpose and a desired future that was in line with their passions and aspirations. So they focused on building a society rather than building profits first, and that built a shared vision amongst the company and in the minds of the public. They really aimed to end counterfeit drug practices and built trust across borders using their supply chain solutions. That was their philosophy, and that yielded great dividends for them in the way of building hope and an ideal vision amongst the company. Also outside, many employees and customers had great optimism about the future of Sproxil. They reached higher and they challenged themselves and others to provide assurance to a wider range of products once they began to build up their reputation as a good supplier of confidence against counterfeit drugs. So this all built up to their hope as well. And finally, was in line with their core identity of working together for society rather than for their own profits, which again built towards their shared vision of always leading the way in their global vision and focusing on society first. So all these pieces came together to create a shared vision of helping society and seeing the benefits of their work there rather than in profitability. That was always second to building society, and that's why their shared vision really worked. Conversely, the shared vision never really developed for Afrostream, and we'll go through it here piece by piece again, and we'll see where they had a few breakdowns that kept them from building a shared vision and really succeeding as a company. So to begin, their self-efficacy was too high really in the beginning, and they had a good belief in themselves, but it really led to them overextending themselves, and that inhibited their growth long term. They did have a good passion. Their passion was to provide greater dissemination of African media, especially in Africa and around Europe, and that was okay. But their aspiration was not in line with their passion right away, and it was to compete with the giant Netflix on a global stage, and I didn't really think that they could succeed by starting with a goal that big. And it wasn't, we'll find it wasn't really in line with their career stage or their life cycle. They wanted to compete with Netflix but didn't have the money or the manpower to do so, so their investors really lost willingness to keep reinvesting in a company that was failing. And that relates directly to the feasibility of their goals. They wanted to achieve things that were too great too early, and they didn't have the money for it. Their purpose and their image of a desired future were in line with each other, but not really appropriate. They wanted global recognition, and they focused on growth and success and profitability right away, but again, they were too small and didn't have the ability to take on the Netflix of the world right away. That's basically exactly what their philosophy was, to compete with Netflix, to grow and be recognized, and it really wasn't on the health of the employees or their company in this place that they were. So hope and an ideal vision never really were developed. They did have optimism in the beginning, but it dwindled fast when the founder gave up on the project. Again, if you recall from a previous slide, he said that the company really was a miracle that they were alive, and that doesn't build hope within a company or with its employees. So as a result, their core identity was for instant success, but they weren't able to achieve that, and as a result, they never achieved a shared vision, and that led to their demise. Finally, to sum this all up, we asked the question, who shared the vision then? Was it Sproxil or was it Afrostream? And at this point, it's pretty obvious that Sproxil shared the vision. They were all united, the public, the company of Sproxil, the employees, and the consumers. Sproxil first focused on the public's needs, and that really inspired their employees to work hard, and inspired the consumers to engage with Sproxil, and it gave them trust in the company and in the technology that they were using. We talked about before how Sproxil had positive emotional attracting throughout the company, especially internally. When they talked to each other, they were motivating and they were encouraging, and that built unity between the employees and the CEO, Ashifi Gogo. So they shared a vision internally and with the public to provide public protection against counterfeit drugs. They cared about society first. They didn't care about making profits. That was a secondary goal. And so this really provided a shared vision universally, whether it be a government body or Sproxil or Ashifi Gogo or any of the employees. They all knew that the public's welfare was what was first, and that led to unity and a shared vision.
This is Yanjun fan, and I'm going to talk about the social identity groups and the resonant design leadership and also connection to the culture map. And first, in the social identity groups, Sproxil actually was identified as the counterfeit fighter because they focused on verifying and fight counterfeit medicine and also some other products. And they also built the mission of providing trust for the purchasing of the consumers. And also, they were identified as the safety and the trust provider. They're trying to build the trust and safety in the supply chains and also the markets. And they provide services in over 10 industries and protect over millions of consumers. And also, they are the first movers. They brought the new technology into the markets, like the mobile technology to provide safety for their consumers and the verification for the products. And they're also one of the first startups in this industry. And for Afrostream, they actually are the challengers. They knew the difficulty of launching a new digital media company, and they know this needs a lot of legal acquisition from the larger chains, and they cost a lot of money and a lot of time. And they also refused to give up easily. They were trapped and beaten by some giants, and they went back to the road again and again after being beaten so many times during their 4-year operation. And also, they were the trapped group. Like I said, they were surrounded by several giants in the industry, like Netflix. And also, it's really hard for them to turn the table because they were facing the financial crisis and they were short of the funds to turn the table. And they were beaten by Then I will discuss about the resonant and dissonant leadership between the two companies. Sproxil actually has a really resonant leadership. But Dr. H.V. Gogo, the founder and CEO, he actually put an early effort on building trust and relationship within the company and with his team. And also because his early effort, he actually had a really deep trust from their team and his employees. So he actually is using the top-down leadership, which actually works perfectly in his company. And also he led building social environment within the company and also in the external environment of the company. And he shared a similar vision with the team. They were trying to fight the counterfeit and trying to enable consumers in populous emerging markets to make the best purchasing decision for the consumers. And for the Afrostream, they actually have the dissonant leadership. Their founder, Tanji Bakam, he actually divided from the original vision after the decline in the first year, and also he failed to analyze the competitors well and the market shares properly. And he focused too much on fundraising and financial activities other than building the organizational environment like Dr. Gogo did. And also his authoritarian leadership actually is hurting the company, and his team might be harmed by his leadership style. Now I'm going to discuss about the connection to the cultural map textbook. In chapter 7, it talks about the discrete scale. And I think Sproxil falls on confrontational in the discrete scale, since their disagreement and debate actually is positive for their organization. And Dr. Gogo was open to any debate and disagreement from his team, and they can transform the debate or any disagreement to the development for the company. And Afrostream efforts avoids confrontational in this discrete scale because he was not open to accept any disagreement or debate, and his leadership style just not beneficial to the company, and the company cannot bear any disagreement and debate. Otherwise, they were facing the larger financial crisis, and their fundraising will be screwed up. And in the chapter 8, it discusses about the scheduling scale. And Sproxil offers on flexible time in the scheduling scale, since they are providing services in over 10 industries, like I mentioned before, and they have their balanced task division, and there would be no interruptions for their tasks and their task relations in the company. However, Afrostream focuses on linear time in the schedule scale because they focus on only one task of acquisition at a time and do one by one. And also their fundraising schedule is also like yearly. They have only one goal of the fundraising for 1 year, and then if they facing the decline or like financial crisis, they will just start a new task of fundraising. But they do not have the multiple tasks on how they manage their funds and how to manage their tasks on acquisition together. So I think they focus on the linear time in the scheduling scale. Above are all our comparative analysis. And feel free to ask us any questions you have. Thank you very much.